let's just breathe that out with 3 nice, long, powerful ohms. Feel the energy? Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Seth. Pecos, kirtan guitar, sound healer, didgeridoo player. I don't think we have any new people in here today, so I don't think I need to introduce myself. But I do have a guest speaker here today. And because my throat is sore, and my lovely, beautiful daughter who's visiting from San Diego gave me a cold last night, I'm going to sit in chair and be a receiver today. And I was planning on sharing it with our guest speaker, but I'm going to go ahead and let her talk to you about a topic that you hear me speak of all the time. Getting out of wrong and right, getting out of duality, believing there's a good and a bad, an evil and a holy, because that's the voice of the ego that says that we are in a place where things can be at opposing angles, because when they are opposed, they are not together, and therefore that creates an energy of separateness, which keeps us in a state of being separate from the divine. When we look at something and say, there isn't good and bad, there's just somebody or something that is operating out of a certain kind of belief system, and we can hold space for them, and we can see them as a divine being of light going through their own experience, we start to get deeply embedded in the idea that we are never truly separate from the divine, that is only an illusion, something that we fear. And one of my favorite acronyms for fear is it's false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. That is what fear is. It's not real. Everything that we see, everything we experience, every person we meet, every aspect of the world that we have manifested simply is a projection of all that we are. And if we don't like what we see, we start changing it from within here. And as you've heard many times as I've gone through the expansion of the Prophet Lao Tse, that when we have peace in our heart, we create peace in our own home. When we create peace in our home, and everyone else does the same thing, we have a peaceful neighborhood. If all the neighborhoods create peace, we have peace in the city. And if all the cities did the same thing, we would have peace in the nation. And if all the nations did the same thing, we'd have peace in the world. And if all the worlds did the same thing, we'd have peace in the universe. So universal peace starts right here. not out there while you're waiting for your boss to quit nagging you or your spouse to quit doing whatever they're doing. It's making you miserable, or your neighbor to stop doing that, or your dog to stop barking. While you're waiting for peace out there to happen, I hope you have some long winter supplies. Start right here. So I'm going to take a seat and I'm going to introduce the Reverend Dr. Bonnie Bernard. And she's going to be talking to us about duality and her topic, the one great idea. And she's also going to be sharing about some of the future events that we're having, and one of them will be right here on October 19th. We're having Louisa Stowe. So let's give Dr. over there. Oh, nice.
Thank you. My goodness, I feel so delighted to be here. I was driving down the freeway, and I must say I just moved to LA not even 3 weeks ago. So I was just driving down the freeway, not sure how long it was going to take to get here. And what I could see in my mind's eye was it was like coming to a campfire with my angel friends, sitting in heaven, having a little talk about what we've been learning, and today was my turn. And so what I want to talk about is living in the kingdom of heaven. I call it God because I like that word, but living in the kingdom, and then evicting ourselves out of it by choosing right and wrong thinking and stepping into that field, and then how to get ourselves back into the space of oneness when that happens. And I wanted to start with my favorite poem by Rumi, which is why I have my notes up here because I don't have it memorized. The first part, I'm sure many of you know, but it's the second part to me that just holds so much value. He says, beyond our idea of right and wrongdoing, there is a field, I will meet you there. Beyond our idea of right and wrongdoing, there is a field, a singular field. I'll meet you there. And then he says, when the soul lies down in the grass, the world is too full to talk about. When the soul lies down in the grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make sense anymore. But when we're in that field, that ideas and language and even the phrase each other does not make sense anymore. I love that. I love that. I love that. So I had my first experience of the field of oneness when I was a 5-year-old little girl, and I was playing in the garden. And I had that moment where I felt the presence surrounding me, and I felt incredible divine love, and I got down on my knees, and I said, God, I will grow up and become a minister. Now this was a big deal, because back in the early 60s when I did this, I was going to the Episcopal Church, the only one in my family. I took myself down to church every week, sat in the big people church. I was the only one in my family who went, and here I claimed I'm going to grow up and be a minister, and all the ministers were called fathers. So I thought, this is really funny. I'm going to grow up and be called Father Bonnie. And I just thought that that was very humorous, but it never crossed my mind that I wouldn't do what it is that my heart said that I would be doing, which is to bring forth that feeling tone that I experienced at 5 years old, that space of oneness into my life and into the world. And so I spent 2009, 10, and 11 in silence and solitude, in prayer, by myself, secluded, doing the whole monk thing. And I came out in 2012, so I've been out in the world again for about 18 months or so. And I had experienced such incredible connection in that place by myself. And then coming out to interface with people, I started noticing how easy it was for me if I made the choice to leave that serene, delightful inner space. And so I started getting curious, and sometimes I call myself a metaphysician, and other times I call myself a meta-detective. And it's because I really like to see what's going on behind the human thought patterns and how I get hooked. And so I started getting curious as to how I could begin my day from such a yummy, yummy, serene, peaceful place, and then throughout the day get hooked. And so what I noticed was that I allowed myself to step into, live from, or be contaminated by this human dynamic field that's called the field of right and wrong making. It's an entire potent field that when we act from it, in it, around it, or play with it, we can harm ourselves and harm others, and that is not what my heart desires for certain. So, in meditation one day, I asked to have shown to me a time when I acted out of this field, a time that had been completed, done, resolved, and healed, so that I could step back into that and relive it consciously in my mind. And I learned an awful lot, and that's what I want to share with you today. So the example I use, please see it as instructional, for it's a personal example. But the example that I use is that a while back, I went to the doctor to have my blood drawn. Now this is a test that I do once a year, so I'm familiar with it. I go, they take 2 vials of blood out of my arm, the phlebotomist does, and then he sends it off to the lab, and a week later I get the results. So this time I show up at the doctor's office, I go to the phlebotomist, and he's new. Never met him before, never seen him, don't know who he is. And so I sit down and he draws 1 vial of blood out of my arm. And I say to him, excuse me, don't you need to draw 2? And he said, oh, no, we have new tests now, I only do 1. And I said, really? I don't want to drive across town again. I don't want to come all the way back to have to do a do-over if this is incorrect. Could you please check? And he says, I don't need to check. I know, I do this all the time. This is a new testing process. I promise you, Bonnie, we only take 1 vial for the test that you need. And I said, well, are you certain? Because I really don't want to be coming back here. And he goes, Bonnie, I am certain all is good. So I said, all right, fine. He takes the 1 vial, I leave, and guess what? I get a phone call a couple days later that says, your test is incomplete. You needed 2 vials of blood, okay? I get that message, and immediately I was triggered. And immediately I was triggered into right and wrong thinking. And in this, I want us to look at the thoughts of right and wrong, the thoughts themselves, and then we'll go deeper into it. So the thought that I had was, oh great, because of his error I lost. Okay, so this is a thought that goes along with the field of right and wrong, is the idea of lost. Okay, like it was supposed to be some other way, and because it wasn't, I lost. And it's his fault. Okay, so the thought, I lost, is a thought of lack, and it activates all kinds of other stuff in the field of right and wrong making. Okay, so the thought is, I lost. Another thought is, I can't win, that goes along with that. Because of his error, I was burdened. This is his fault. He is incompetent. I have been hurt or victimized by him. And sometimes when it's a really, really, really good thought storm, why me? Why me? Of all the patients he could do this to, why did he do it to me? Okay? Now, if he accepted thoughts of wrongdoing on his end, this may be some of the thoughts that he was thinking. Dang, I screwed up. I can't seem to do anything right. I should have known better, and I caused someone some harm, which causes guilt and all kinds of other stuff, right? So here's the thought process, some of the thoughts that go on with the field of right and wrong making. Now that you and I are awake to those thoughts, when they come up within us, we are consciously at choice. And we can choose, I'm returning to the kingdom of heaven, or I'm going to allow myself to go deeper into this vortex, okay? Because we start with thoughts, then we go from thoughts to belief systems. So now these are the belief system. If I, who am right, decide to take it further, which I might have in my car ride across town. Now, what's interesting about belief systems is they usually have the preface of I am. So if I go from the thought that I've lost, then when I take it into my body of the I am consciousness, then that becomes an identity for me. So some of the beliefs that I would have of being right is I am a victim. It's no longer he victimized me, it's now I am a victim. It is no longer if he followed my instructions it would have been done correctly. It is now I am right. And in that I am right comes the energy of I am superior. Now when I was exploring this, I had to be really honest with myself and say, you know, sometimes it feels really, really good to be right and superior. Sometimes when I'm in that space, I get an energetic charge. It's really frenetic, and it's short-lived, and it kind of burns out my endocrine system, but it can feel really good. But it's a pseudo-power. It's not the real deal. And so when I'm aware that that's starting to go for me is also a clue that I could be called back to the kingdom should I allow myself to do that. Another thought is I'm superior or I am better than. Those are belief systems that come out of taking the thought and bringing it into being. Does that make sense? Okay, on the wrong side then, my phlebotomist buddy, if he really takes it seriously that he had made an error and caused harm to me in my life, then he would see himself as being wrong. He would say, I am a being that is wrong. He would see, since I am a victim, that he was somehow a perpetrator of that. He somehow did something to me that harmed me, that was bad. He would also see himself as less than, inferior, or a loser. And this to me was a big, huge, gigantic red flag in this learning as metaphysicians, as a meta-detective. This was really powerful for me to grasp. The whole system started with my belief that I had lost. And now as we go into the state of beingness, and we're in the belief system, the phlebotomist thinks he's a loser. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating how that dynamic is so fluid that both sides can actually share the same beliefs or swap them back and forth? Is this making sense? So we've gone from a thought to a belief. Take a big deep breath. Beautiful. Okay. So after we've gone from thought to belief, then we take on the actions, okay? Now, an action of someone who is right tends to be a persistent, loud voice. And again, this was a huge aha for me, is that as I was being right, and I was being right, and I was being right, I cut myself off with connection with him. Okay? But how I do it energetically is through blasting. Okay, so I'm not open, I blast. And his action on the other side would be withdrawal. Okay? But both result in the same thing, which is cut off a non-connection. So here I am right, and in the action of right and superior, I would blast energetically. But this is so interesting because back in the old days we used to gossip. Well, we still kind of do. But we would call up some friends because we have made ourselves alone. See, so this is so fascinating. Instead of connecting with the phlebotomist and having this great exchange, I have cut myself off, and then internally I feel lonely. So I have to gossip and call all of my friends forward so that they can be on my side of the deal. And together we can be mad at the phlebotomist, okay? Because I have made myself alone. So I start gossiping. But this is the danger of today, and this is where today is different. We have the internet. Ooh, that phlebotomist can be in a lot of trouble. You know, I could really write up stuff, send it out, have him lose his job, do a big thing about how inefficient the doctor's office is. That the little can become so exaggerated and can continue to be repetitive because of the culture that we live in today. So the right maker then has the ability, should they choose, to really do some significant damage, which is interesting because we often think of right as good and wrong as bad. So that's fascinating, very, very fascinating. Okay. So actions, we've gone from thoughts, beliefs, actions. I have gossiping and grabbing and grasping for a connection from someone who is right. Other actions are bullying or hounding. I don't know if you guys have ever done that, but bullying and hounding when you feel right. dominion over, a feeling of superiority and pulling the power card. And then what's interesting is energetically becoming rigid. You know when you're right, you're tight, nothing can get in because it's like I am right and the energy is static and it is rigid and there's no fluidity to love, to come back and forth, to have some interchange. From the wrong side, then, when I believe that I am wrong, I can withdraw from connection. Addictions become extraordinarily attractive, whether it's shopping, drugs, alcohol, all the addictions that we're aware of. And we can then cease trying. We can say, look, I'm not, everything I do is wrong anyway. Why even show up and try? And so there can be kind of a lethargy or a lack of action that happens on the wrong side. And then there's where the right person is very rigid, the wrong person tends to be boundaryless. You know, just kind of amoeba-like, hanging out there energetically. The right person can attack and the wrong person can retreat. Take another big deep breath. Okay, so there's an impact to all of this. And the impact is that when we take on these personas of being right or being wrong, they impact our body temples. As living in the kingdom of God, we have the opportunity to tend so beautifully to our temple and be kind to the temple of our brothers and sisters. But when we choose to enter into this field, breakdown happens. And each one of those two personalities have different kinds of diseases or illnesses that show up. And I talked to my doctor colleagues and they gave me a list on each side on which is which, and you could probably figure them out. You know, high blood pressure can come from being on the side of being right all the time, and depression can come on believing that you're wrong all the time. So there's some very obvious contributions to forms of physical illness that show up. But other impacts are war. Wars are started by right and wrong thinking one country's right, one country's wrong. Other right and wrong is discord in relationships, believing that I am right and someone else is wrong, cuts off the opportunity for intimacy. Right and wrong has the health, as I mentioned, and it cuts us off from our own soul, which is one of the most painful experiences that we can have suited up as humans, is to be cut off from our own connection with the divine within us. Let's take a big deep breath. So I talked to my human resource colleagues, and they said that about 90% of all of the lawsuits in the workplace come from this dynamic. I talked to my therapist colleagues, and they say about